All right. Hello, everyone. So yesterday we had our exam on 257. Hopefully you guys did well. Whether you did or whether you didn't do that well, that's okay. Let's just focus for the final, for the more ideas that we're going to be learning. So for today, our focus is actually going to be on Turing machines. And the main lectures, you might have already been 2 weeks taking the ideas of Turing machines, so you might be a bit advanced there, but that's fine. We'll start from scratch. Because now is where I think ideas really start to become interesting. So before, this was our limit, this was our ceiling with PDAs. We couldn't do the language AN, BN, CN. It was just too much. The best we could do is, okay, I put all the A's, then I pop the A's when I read the B's, but then I'm stuck with C's. So now, eventually, like we needed more power, and the more power now comes with this newer machine called the Turing machine. And now we're getting closer and closer to answering the question, which is, what is a computer? Like if you remember from the beginning of the semester, we started asking, hey, what really is a computer? So far, it feels like the computer is what is our ability to solve problems. Like with DFAs and NFAs, we were solving problems, then we hit the ceiling of AN, BN. We can't do that. Now with PDAs, we were able to solve even more problems when introduced memory, but then even with that, we hit the ceiling AN, BN, CN. So really what we're trying to do is, what is the bare minimum that we can, what is the bare minimum power we need to be able to solve pretty much what our computers, what our phones are able to solve? What's really the bare minimum? So the description of that, or the answer to that, comes with the description of the Turing machine. So with PDAs, we had memory, which is the stack. Now our memory is going to be different. It's just a strip of tape that can be infinite, just a really long tape. It could be semi-infinite, like it could start from like left to right, or it could start from right to left. Like it's finite here, but infinite on the right, or it could be infinite in both ways. Doesn't really matter. Eventually, you will learn that all of these are kind of equivalent. But the operations are kind of different. So we have the read, the write, and move. So you're reading something, then you're writing, then you have the option to either move left or right. So how does that look like? Imagine you have this strip of tape and these states. And you'll move from Q2 to Q1 if you read something, write something, and then you'll move in a certain direction. So for example, let's say, so right now I'm at state Q2 and my head is pointing to this part of my tape. So currently I should read 1. Like an example, if I read 1, I have the option to write whatever I want. Say I write 0, then I decide to move to the left. So since currently I'm Q2, I'm pointing to something on my tape. I'm reading 1, okay. I'll override it with 0, so remove here, put 0. Then I'll move to the left. So right now my header is pointing to this one. And that's all it is. So now my state is Q1. The head is pointing to this part of the tape. Oh, yeah. And now depending on what Q1 has, like if Q1, oh, there's 1 on the tape, you write something, you move somewhere, or if you read 0, you write something, you move somewhere. So unlike before with PDAs and PDA and NFAs and DFAs, where we had some string like A, B, B, and a bunch of A's, for example. Before we were always going left to right. Like I start here, I read the A, then I read the B, then I read the B all the way to the end. So I have to parse the whole thing. But now I'm not really parsing it, I'm just always scanning it left, right, depending on what I wanna do. So as an analogy, I like to use this old fossil. I don't know if you know it, if it still exists. This is like a tape recorder or a cassette. So here, what kind of things do we have? I can play it, like listen to something. I can record over it, or I can move fast forward. I can fast forward backwards or forwards. And this is kind of what we're doing here. At any moment, I'm either reading or playing something that's currently on my tape. I can override it, I can record over it, or I can move left and right. Okay. Now, let's start with a basic machine. So give a Turing machine that accepts strings with even number of A's. So this is the first exercise we ever solved for in the recitations. So let's try to do a Turing machine for that. And again, the sequence will look like this. We're gonna read, write, and then move. Unlike before with PDAs, when we also like read or parse the string, but then we pop and then push. So this was before, this is now. So any idea what we could do here? Turing machines is this. All right, if I want to try and do regularly what I used to do, okay, I'll make some state, call it even, and have some other state called odd. Like it feels I should do the same thing, right? And I have my shape like just a bunch of A's. If I try to do this, okay. So currently on my tape, I'm right here. So say I'm in the state. I read A. I'll write over it with an X, and I'll move to the right. Like remember, Turing machines are pretty powerful, and now we're trying to solve something that we can solve with DFAs. So it's not going to be ridiculous. So for this first A, I'm swapping it with an X. And I move to the right, so now my cursor is pointing at this A. Okay, that means I have an odd number of A's. Same thing now, if I'm here and I read an A, just go backwards. Do I move to the right or do I move to the left? Well, I have to keep moving to the right. Like it's like as if you're trying to parse a normal string here. So we keep going to the right. And now this gets swapped with X and so on until I finish. Like until I parse the whole thing to the end. Now, is this correct? We're using the new functionality, the new operations, but does this really work? There are a couple of problems with it. First of all, the accepting states in Turing machines are immediate. What that means is once you enter an accepting state, you'll accept right away. It's not like PDAs, NFAs where you're looping and when you stop parsing the string or when you finish parsing the string, that's when you accept. That's not the case. Here, once you enter an accept state, that's it. So we have to fix this. This isn't really gonna work. So this is what we'll do. Call it. Make a state called Q even, Q odd. Same thing. We're still gonna be looping between these. So read an A, and I actually don't even need to remove it's fine. I can override the A with an X. That's fine. Or I could just say move to the right. Now I have to double check on this syntax, but usually if you just right away say you're moving to the right, that's as if you're saying, oh, write A with an A and move to the right. But we'll need to double check this syntax wise. So yeah, the reason I'm not gonna override the A is because I don't really need it. I'm just reading the A and moving to the right. I don't really need that power. And here, if I read an A, I go back. Now, however, when will I accept? Okay, if I'm currently at Q even, and I read this blank. So with tapes, if there's infinites on both sides, you're gonna have this U shape that symbolizes blank, and you can have as many as you want onto the left and right. So if you read that blank, what does it mean? Well, it only mean one thing. You reached the end of the tape. So here logically, I parsed through all the A's and they happen to be an even number, and I reached the blank. Well, I should go to the accepting state. I'll just call it Q accept. So here actually we might name them Q accept rather than doing two circles, two concentric circles. But is this done now? Yes and no. It's not done yet because when do I really reject? Because if this is now my accepting state, do these mean the rest of them are my rejecting states or non-accepting? No. So it's the same thing for rejecting. Oh, it's the same thing for rejecting states. They're also immediate. What that means is we'll also have some state called Q reject instead of Q accept. Once I enter that, I'll reject. When will I enter it? Well, same thing. Oh, I reach the end of my tape and I haven't, and I have an odd number, so I'll just go to Q reject. However, we could say, so for this red part, we could say, oh, whenever, if there are not enough, if there are no transitions, it just goes to the reject state. Similar to NFAs, where if not all the transitions are there, it's as if they go to the trap state. Same thing here. If there is some missing transition, it's as if it goes to the reject state. Like if I didn't have this part, and I'm currently at Q odd, and I read a blank, well, we could assume I just go to the reject. But it's important to at least mention it. Like mention it in your solution. Oh, if it's all the non-existing transitions, they just go to the reject. All right. Now we get to this part, Jad. So you don't need to be they don't need to be exhaustive like DFAs. Maybe we'll answer that next week because is a Turing machine deterministic or non-deterministic? Like that has its own idea. Like, could it be like a DFA where every path you take will be always the same, no matter how many times you parse the tape? Or is it like NFA? Maybe there's this and maybe there's this. But for now, yeah, you could just assume if there are transitions that's not there, they just go to the reject. But my question or my idea, what I was trying to say, can I have like here another reading of the A going somewhere? Is this okay or not okay? We'll see that next week. All right, now going over here. So before we give a Turing machine for this, for A and B and Cn, imagine I want to do it for just A and Bn. What is my idea here? So say you have a bunch of A's followed by a bunch of B's. Is there something I could do here? Knowing that, like imagine you're trying to write a program, it's Python, Java, whatever, and the only tools you have is you can read, write, and move left and right. So what could I do here? Well, I have three A's and three B's, right? The way for it to work, imagine right now I'm currently, remember, like you can overwrite. Imagine I'm currently at A. I'll remove this and put an X in its place. I can do that, right? I'm currently reading an A and I'm overwriting with an X. Then I keep moving to the right until I find a B. And that B exactly, I'll cross off one character off each side. So then this B will be replaced with an X. Now what? I have to go back until I find an A. And I can do that, right? I'm simply moving to the left. And remove this with an X. Then go and find a B. Then go back. Then go and find a B. Eventually, if like the number of A's that I crossed is the same as number of B's that I crossed, or like if all my string is now X's, that must mean I have an equal number. So that's like maybe a high level description. Okay, we'll do something similar now, but for A and B and C n. So over here, I'll say, oh, I have A, B, 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 and a few more C's. And we'll write a high-level language for this one. C, C, and C. Okay. High-level description. High-level description is like you're explaining an algorithm, how it works. Because there's going to be 2 or 3 parts with Turing machines. We're going to draw some. We're going to explain in a high-level language some. And we should be able to read and understand Turing machines. All right, so I'll do what we mentioned before. Cross an A with an X. Then I should go, so right, I cross the first A with an X. Then what? I have to find, I can't cross a B right away. Like I know it's high level, but we'll try to be as detailed as possible. I can't cross a B right away. I have to first find a B and cross it with, I could say an X, but for now I'm gonna say a Y. I could say an X and maybe it'll work, but it can cause some problems I'll explain later. For now, let's just say, oh, it's a different letter, so I'll cross it with a different letter. Like X will mean, oh, there was an A, but you crossed it, and Y will mean, oh, there was a B, but you crossed it. And then we find a C and cross it with a Z. For every character, we'll choose a different character. So essentially what I did here was I crossed the first A. I went over here, crossed this B, then I go over here and cross this C. Oops, I put them all X's, but they should be Y and Z. All right, now what's the next step? I'm currently, my header is, or my head is currently pointing at this symbol, C. What should I do? Well, go back to the start and find an A again. So we'll say, oh, step 2, this is a really important step. Go back to the beginning or to the start. But we'll say start in quotations because really, what is the start? Okay, what do you think we should do for step 3 here? Like say I went to the very start and okay, right now my header is at this A. Gonna have to do the whole thing again, right? Like, okay, I'll cross this A, I'll go find the B, cross it with a Y, I'll go find a C and cross it with a Z. So is this like step 3 or am I repeating step 1? I'm repeating step 1. So it seems like step 3, at some point I have to go back to step 1. But not always. I'll keep going back to step 1 as long as there's still something to cross. So for this last one, I go back. So right now, right here, I'll go back to this one, cross it, then cross this, cross this. Cool. That looks good. Now, how can I know when I'm done? Exactly, Jat. We're simply doing an algorithm. We're gonna draw this soon, but giving a high-level description is just as important as drawing, because the more details we can give here, the easier the drawing will be. So we go. So when do we not go to back to step 1? When we're done. So if no more A, B, and C, like if no more, I should really accept. I'm done. I crossed everything. It's all now X's, Y's, and Z's. And the way that I'm crossing them ensures that they're the same number. Else, if there's still something to cross, I go back to step 1. All right. Now, if this is clear, if there's no problem here, we'll actually try to draw this. So we'll do another example, A, the B's, and the C's. Let's space those out. So how will our picture look like here? Well, let's just apply our algorithm. So I'll start drawing. And like the first one, we're crossing an A, right? In the first state. So I'll simply draw a line where I'm reading an A, replacing it with an X, and moving to the right. So same thing as before. This one gets replaced with an X. Now, what do you think we should do once I reach this state? Like, where is my header currently pointing at? I removed here with an X. Now my header is here. Either an A or a B. What do you mean either an A or a B? Like, exactly, like there's either going to be an A or there's going to be a B there. Those are the two possibilities. If there's an A, I should skip. Exactly. In this specific case, I have more A's, but it's possible like if I only got A, B, C, like I read an A, right away there's a B. It's wrong to assume there's going to be a B right away. Like in general, there could be more than one B. So let's do that. Simply skip the A's. So we'll call this state skip A. If you read an A, go to the right. I keep skipping my A's, so not this, not this. Oh, now this is not an A, this is a B, so I cross it with a Y. If there's a B, cross it with a Y, and move to the right. What will this state be called? So currently this B got replaced with a Y. Now it's the same thing, but now we're doing it for the B's instead of like what could, so I moved to the right. What could be here? It's either going to be a B or a C. So first I have to make sure I skip all the B's. So we'll call this skip B. I skip all of them. I reach the C. Now we'll, C, you're going to get replaced by a Z. And I'm going to move to the right as well. So this one becomes, a Z, not a Y. Okay, interesting. What should my machine do now? So what are we currently at? At which state? It feels like I'm done with step one. So now, as Jad is saying, I have to do step two, which is rewind. So I'll actually call this state, this is going to be a popular name, rewind, because we usually do this a lot. Rewinding to the very beginning. How can I go to like two things? How do I go to the beginning and what's really my beginning? So no matter what I read, I have to go and I'll say my beginning is, how about this A? This feels like it should be my new start. Like I could go all the way back, or I could just go to this first A because that's where I want to start crossing again. So I'm going to go all the way back till I find that A. What am I going to go through on my journey? I'm currently, since I moved to the right, I'm currently at this C. So I have to go, so I have to say, if you read a C, go to the left. If I read a Z, go to the left. If I read a B or a Y, I go to the left. And is this enough? So if I keep doing this, eventually I'll reach this A and not this one, which is a different A. So even if I read A's, I'll also go to the left because it's important the order. Like I can't cross here, then start crossing here. It'll be messed up. I have to cross from left to right. So Jad is saying go from left to right. Exactly. Read an X after reading an A. So I go all the way back until I really reach my first X. So go all the way back till I reach this A. So if I have A's, keep reading and going to the left. And finally, I think the only thing really left that I haven't read that made me go to the left is the X. So if I read an X, go to the right. Think about it. I kept going to the left until I found an X. Then I moved to the right. That means I'm currently pointing at the A, and I can, now I'm back to step one, right? Is my program good enough? We'll check, but before I check that, I just want to put a remark here on this one. Was it necessary to move to the right? Like, could I have moved to the left or not? We'll see this. I just want to put a remark on it. All right. So what am I currently doing? I'm at the start. So we'll call this actually start. I read an A and I replace it with an X. So this A in red is where I'm currently pointing at. I put an X. I skip all the A's, so I'm currently here. What do you think? What should I do here? It feels like my solution is missing. Because right now I'm pointing at a Y, but I don't have a transition to that. I'm either skipping the A's or I see a B and I replace it with a Y. It feels like I also need to skip something else. I need to skip the Y's too. So if I read a Y, I go to the right. So there's two things after you remove an A, there's two things you want to skip. The other A's, like this one. Where's my cursor? Like this one. Or some Y's that you have already skipped. So you see here in the high level language, all we said was find the B. But it's not that simple, right? Like how can you find the B? You have to skip the A's and you have to skip the Y's, which were the previous B's you removed. Okay, to do that, that's basically it. Like I just skipped the Y's. So now I reach this B, replace it with a Y. Using this line, B gets replaced with a Y. And now at skip B, is skipping the B's enough here? Do I need to skip something else? We also need to skip the Z's. So here, skip Z. So if I read a Z, I'll go to the right. Like imagine you just replace this by a Y with a Y. You're skipping the B's to reach the C, but before you're able to reach the C, you have to skip the Z's that in the first run you removed. So I skip them. Then when I finally see a C, I'll replace it with a Z. Does this make sense? If you're stuck, let me know. It just seems like in our first run, things were pretty simple because it's like for the first time you're removing, oh, like imagine I haven't removed anything. Like, oh, first time I go on X, skip A's, Y, skip B's, Z. It's very straightforward. But the second time we're looping, okay, you remove here, make it an X. Now you skip the A's to reach the B, but there's something in front of you, the Y from the first run. So you have to skip that too before you're able to reach the B. See, the only difference is between the high level language and what we're doing here is we're being way more detailed. If you've ever taken an assembly course, you'll get what I'm saying. Like when you're working with registers and so on, you have to be very detailed. All right, will our last skip work? Let's see. Or will our last run work on its own? So I rewinded and I went to the beginning. So right now here, last thing we did was we crossed a C with a Z. We won't go back to the rewind. I'm skipping C, Z, B, Y, and A. So it takes me, so I'm currently here. Takes me all the way back here. I read an X. So I go back to the right. I'm currently pointing at the last A. So let's see if my algorithm is as enough right now. Read an A, cross it with an X. All right. Now this state is saying skip the A's and skip the Y's. Okay, I don't have any more A's, but I'll skip these Y's. Now it's saying if you find a B, put a Y in its place. Great. Now it's saying skip the B's and skip the Z's. I don't have any B's. I'll skip the Z's. I reach the last C. It's saying replace it with the Z and go to the right. But I don't have anything else on the right. What does that mean? Like, is this a problem? Is this an error? So this is why I was saying, do we need to go to the right? It's not wrong. If you go to the right, that simply means, oh, you're going to the, exactly, it's just a blank. You're going to the blank. So is that wrong? No. Should I accept? Also no. Why shouldn't I accept? Not necessarily. Like, imagine you have the example, A, or I'll say two A's, two B's, or three A's, two B's, and two C's. Okay, so the X, Y, and Z. Then I go back, X, Y, and Z. And according to our algorithm now, I move to the right to the blank. But I shouldn't accept because, oh, there might be an A here that I didn't cross. So I actually have to go back and check if my string doesn't have any more A's and B's. Like notice step 3. When do we accept? If no more A, B, and C. So this doesn't happen on its own. I have to check it. But I do have to modify. A bit here. What happens? Since I said I'm going to the right, I have to add this rule. Oh, if there is a blank I reach, I also have to go to the left. But since we're here, I'm going to say this remark. If we actually had said left instead of right, if we did that, do you agree that I don't need this? Because whenever you cross a C with a Z, instead of going to the right, oh, you start early going backwards. You start your journey backwards early instead of going to the right, then rewinding. Like there's no point here in going to the right. Like just start rewinding right away. And not only that, I don't need this rule either. The C. I'll keep them, but I don't really need them, right? The blank, obvious, as we just said. But the C, same thing. Imagine A, B, C. X, Y, and then this one, I cross it with a Z, but instead of moving my header to the right, I start rewinding right away and move it to the left. So I never see the next C, and I never reach the blank. So really, these two rules, even though no harm, no foul, as long as you write them, you don't really need them. So I'll say to the left. Now, what's left for me is to check if I should accept. So how do I check if it's accepting or not accepting? So currently I rewind it to the very beginning. Two ways we could do this. Either check if you now simply have X star, Y star, Z star. Technically, you don't need the Y star part because you're gonna rewind all the way till you find an X because of this, and then move to the right. So you really only need to check if it's all Y's and Z's now. So something like this. If I read a Y, I go to the right. And then keep checking O. If it's all Y's, go to the right. If it's all Z's as well, go to the right. Like, just make sure you don't have any more A's and B's, like it's all Y's. And finally, if you read the blank, you go to the right or left, it doesn't really matter. You're just reading a blank. That means you went through the whole thing. It's all Y star, Z star. You just go to Q, accept. Does that make sense? The only thing I'd say is missing. What if, so right now, not even with this part, because of this part, and this part, and even this part, I'm always forcing it, because of the things I just circled, I'm always forcing it to at least have ABC. Do you see it? But it's saying here n is greater than or equal to 0. Like, it's possible I get a tape that's all empty, that's all blank. So with that tape, should I accept? I should accept, because when n is 0, that means it's an empty string. I should accept. I can fix that by simply saying, oh, if I read an empty, from the very beginning, if I read an empty, I'll go here. Then here I'll read another empty, that's okay, and I'll accept. Like remember, you have infinitely many blanks on the right and left, if it's a infinite tape on both sides. So just read two blanks. If you read two blanks, that means it's empty, so you accept right away. All right. Do I have any issue with what we did here? I think it's good. So again, the problem with Turing machines, the room for error is even larger than before. But as the more detailed we are in our higher level description, the easier things will be. But I do have a question. So, but before that question, obviously now, say we did this machine, it's correct. So we broke this previous ceiling for the PDAs. Will we find another ceiling for Turing machines? We'll see. If we find a ceiling, that means, hey, is there something stronger? If we don't find a ceiling, does that mean a Turing machine is like the strongest thing we have? So we'll answer that maybe next time. But why did I use X, Y, Z, and not just X for crossing? Why that? If I did use, say if I used only X, does it work? Let's try. Like, of course, we're gonna have to modify what we wrote slightly, but if I had the 3 A's and the B's and the C's, would that have worked? Well, let's start crossing. Jad, repeating step 1 would be harder. So step 1 of the finding, right? Let's see if we can do it here on a high level language. So this first A, cross it with an X. Then I go and find, so in the first run, it should be easy. Replace A with an X, skip the A's, reach a B, X, skip the B's, X here. Then I go to the left. When I rewind, so this is the tricky part. When you rewind, it's possible, but look how you should rewind. First, you have to skip the B's. Then you have to skip the X's of the B's. Then you have to read an A or something and skip those. So since here since you want to reach the first X, that's like how many X should you choose? Should you remove? That's why actually what people do is mark the beginning of their string with a different symbol. Or like if your string already starts with like the empty blanks, there's no need to. But say you didn't start with an empty blank, you can replace this A with an empty blank. Because remember, this might not always be the case where you have empty blanks on the left. So you'll do it yourself. Oh, the first A, I'll replace it with a blank. Every other A, I'll replace it with an X. But to make it easier on ourselves, let's say we did replace it here with an X. Like we do have the U's. So again, this A was with an X, B with an X, C with an X. Now when I rewind, I'll keep rewinding till I reach the U. Now skip the X's. This is an A. This A is an X. Skip the A's and X's. X. Skip the B's and X's. X. It seems like it's working, right? It seems like it's working. Then I go back to the from here. I go back to this U. Skip the X, reach an A. Skip the X and B, reach a, sorry, skip the A's and X, but I don't have any more A's, so I only skip the X's, etc. It seems like it'll work with this example. But what if I try another example? So this one works. What about the one below? So what about A, B, C, A, B, C? Remember that we want them A star, B star, C star, like the original look. So if I do the same thing, like we have our blanks, which we'll use to go to the left. Okay, this one gets replaced with an X. I skip, oh, right away I find a B, X. Then right away I find a C, X. Now like I loop back to the blank. I skip the X's, I find an A, O, X, B, and C. Do you see it? So it's possible this gets accepted, but it shouldn't, since the format of our string has to be A star, B star, C star. Does that mean just crossing with X doesn't work? Or crossing with just X doesn't work? Not necessarily. So what we simply have to do, but we have to fix it, or we have to do something to avoid the problem. So what's the fix? Well, it's literally what we have written here. Like just do step 0, or like in our high level language, step 0, check if your string or if your tape is A star, B star, C star. That's not hard to do. Like there's going to be an extra step where I do this. Oh, read all A's. Then like I read a B. This will make its length at least 1, but that's fine. I read a B, then read all B's, go to the right, then read a C, read all C's. And when I read a blank, I can rewind and then actually start my solution. So rewind, like read the A's, B's, C's, etc. Read everything and go to the left. Read everything and go to the left. And like here, you read a U, you go to the right, and now you can actually start the actual solution here. So like usually, this is what a lot of people do with their machines. Like if there's something you want to double check, you want your string to be a certain format, check it. Like, okay, now I made sure it's A star, B star, C star. So if I do the only X's method, all I have to make sure now is, oh, it's the same number of A's, B's, and C's. Like I'm sure they're not going to be alternating since I double checked this. And actually, it's not a bad idea that we do this with our original algorithm. It's not a bad idea to do it here either. But I'm not sure. You can give me, if you find a counterexample, great. But maybe there's something wrong with our machine since we didn't check for A star, B star, C star. Now, I think the idea of X, Y, Z does help us move around that. And we could do an extra layer where instead of checking at the beginning, I could have checked here at the start. Oh, sorry, instead of, yeah, at the beginning, I check at the end. So for this part, I could have said, oh, we've already read our X's, now I'll read my Y's, then read a Z, and read my Z's. Is it necessary? I don't think so. I think the XYZ already idea doesn't need that part, but we can do it like to be safe. Like at the very end, just check after you crossed, check that your crossing is X star, Y star, Z star. So might not be necessary here. I lost you. Where are you? Might not be necessary, but just to be safe. So here at the end, we are checking for X star, Y star, Z star, just to make sure our format is fine. Okay. But what I would do to make it like easier on myself, just do the checking at the beginning. Why give a headache? I do the checking at the beginning and I'd still do X, Y's and Z just to so it's completely sealed. But hey, moving away a little bit from the technical issues, we were able to break it. We were able to use an algorithm. This is essentially what it is. It's an idea. It's a high-level description. Using those basic tools where I can only read, write, and move. Like it's not like with Python or Java where I can specifically go to a specific index. No, I have to read it left and right in a specific way. So these basic tools, we were able to break this ceiling. Great. But now let's do this one real quickly. It won't take us a lot of time, I think. Uh, but remember what I said, like for Turing machines, there's three things. We should be able to do a high-level description of something, like here. We should be able to also draw it like we did. And the third part is to be able to understand it. So we're going to see here in the next slide a machine that's already done. We're going to be trying to understand it. And this is what they want. Essentially, they gave us a diagram for this language. Some W made up of zeros and hashtags. But that W has to be of this format. U hashtag V such that T, like the number of the size of V is twice that of U. In other words, just to make it easier, imagine this. You want to make a Turing machine for 0K hashtag 0, 2K. Even though I think technically we could solve this with a PDA, right? You just push 2 zeros at the very beginning. We'll do a PDA for it. Oh, sorry, we'll do a Turing machine for it. But before maybe we dive into this, how about a quick high-level description? What do you think? What could we do a high-level description for this? Like imagine, oh, you have 2 zeros here, hashtag, and then 4 zeros. This is essentially the string that you'd accept. If we want to do something for that, what's like an idea? And hey, I think here we can, like, let's just use X's, why not? So this one would be replaced with an X. When I go to this side, what should I do? Jad, can we cross 2 zeros on the right for every 0 on the left. That's exactly what we want to do. So here I cross a 0 with an X. When I go to the right, I'll not cross only 1 0, I'll cross 2. You see, like it's just an idea, but it works since we're using those three basic building blocks of the Turing machine. I'm reading a 0, I replace it with an X. I move, then I read a 0, and I replace it with an X. I read another 0, replace it with an X. Now I rewind this X, then here, I then go back X and X. It seems like it'll work. And actually here the X's might be okay, since first of all it's only zeros, and like we have a hashtag in the middle, like it's a separator, so that's really helpful. If it was there's just like 0, 3K, that might have been slightly annoying. Or not, may just would have been a different problem. But what's a high level description here? Like what should I do first thing? We said cross 0 on the left with an X. Then what? We went to the right. And we crossed 2 zeros over there. When do I accept? So we crossed 2 zeros with an X. When should I accept? Hey, like it will, same as before, I'll check if it's just like X star hashtag X star accept. But let's learn from our mistake from before. We'll do step 0, check if it's 0 star hashtag 0 star. Like at the very beginning, make sure you have the format, because what if I give you a string that's 0 hashtag zeros hashtag that 0? This shouldn't be accepted. I only have like one hashtag. That's why we double check this. All right. All right, let's do this. What is the purpose? So we have this diagram. We're going to be seeing these questions. So they're asking, what is the purpose of the part of the machine M from the states 1 till 4? So from Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, what are these really doing? So they're reading a 0 and they're putting a U in its place. If you remember, this is kind of like what we mentioned. Like this is the idea of marking start of tape, because you might not always have blanks at the beginning. So when you put a U yourself at the beginning, you're marking the start. So you can go back to that. Then this one, I'm reading a bunch of zeros, hashtag, then reading a bunch of zeros. Then when I see a blank, I go to the left. And what is this doing? Does this feel familiar to what we usually do? Like if I want to translate it, okay, here I'm reading a bunch of zeros. Then here I'm reading a hashtag. Then here I'm reading a different type of zeros. And this part, oh, if you read a 0 or a hashtag, which is everything I have so far, keep going to the left. So these parts, so the first part is checking for marking the start. This part is checking if the format is correct, like 0 star hashtag 0 star. And this part is just rewind. So three ideas: marking the start, checking if the format is correct, and rewinding. All tools all ideas we've seen before. You like just like remember with NFAs you had a trap state, right? Oh, you go over there, you never go out. Well, in Turing machines you have rewind states. Oh, you reach the end, you want to rewind at the beginning after doing something. This good. Part B, the arrow Q6 to Q6 is missing a label. Okay, let's see. So we stopped off at Q4. Everything before Q4 was checking the format and rewinding. So now imagine you're at the very beginning again, but you've already crossed a 0. So what are they doing here? Skipping all the zeros. Hashtag. So Jad is saying I should skip the X's. Exactly. It doesn't seem straightforward right away, but here you should actually skip the X's. Why? In the first run, so 0, hashtag 0, 0, 0, 0. So far, what they've done is mark this with a U and checked if the format is correct. Then in Q5, they skipped these zeros. Q5 to Q6, they read this hashtag. In this part, even though it's not apparent right away, sometime in the future, this is gonna be an X and an X. So here we're simply skipping the X's that we've already crossed in the future or in the past. And, here we're then removing an X. Exactly, Jad. So we should skip X's. What about this one? From Q7 to Q8. So here we skipped an X, or a bunch of X's. We removed the 0. What should we do from Q7 to Q8? Q8 feels like it's rewinding. So let's see the example. Oh, this was a U. Skip the zeros, hashtag. Then they're saying, oh, this should be an X because of this part. What should Q7 to Q8 be? Remember that our Jad, when we read a blank or a 0, not when we read a blank. If we read if we read a blank here, we should reject. If we read a blank here, think about it. Like you crossed an X. If we read a blank here, it's like you have this example. Hashtag 0. Like you shouldn't accept. You removed an X here. You went over here. You removed an X. You're trying to find another 0, but you didn't find it. So it's not enough. So you should reject if you read a blank here. Otherwise, what you're saying, if I read a 0, what should I do with it? Like this, I read another 0. I'll simply cross it with an X. So 0x. Remember, like the whole thing they said, exactly, Jad, I want to cross. The whole thing is 1 0 from the left. So this is the hashtag. So this was the left part. And now here we're at the right part. We cross 1 0, then another 0. Then as you said, in Q8, we're rewinding to the beginning. And it's again, as before, like let's actually read the description of the question. Missing arrows are supposed to lead to the state Q reject. Like if there's an arrow that's not there, similar to this one we just mentioned, where from Q7, if I read a blank, that means I should reject because there wasn't enough zeros. And even though we didn't mention it here, obviously, if there's missing arrows, they go to the reject. All right, next part. I think we're almost done here. So what's the purpose of this rule that we just added? So they're saying this rule that we just said here, if I'm adding 0 removed with X, what's its purpose? Well, for every 0 on the left, we have to cross 2 zeros on the right. That's the whole purpose of it, making sure we're crossing 2 on the left, 2 on the right, and 1 on the left. Part E, to which state should the arrow coming out of Q9 labeled 0xr go to? So with Q8, we rewind it at the very beginning. U is the start, so we run it at the very beginning. Then we went to the right. Q9 on the loop skips the previous zeros we crossed. Then with this key, oh, the new zero, we're crossing it. So where do you think we should go? I'm writing here an example of how it would look like. Until the hashtag. Exactly. Like we want to reach the hashtag. Like right now we cross this X, like we want to go to the other side, essentially. So we cross this zero here, we want to go to the other side. So how can we go to the other side? We have to reuse things we've already seen. So let's see. This was, we read X, we go to the right. Jettisoning Q5. Let's see, should we go here? I think so. I think so. Because you cross the zero with an X, you skip the zeros, which is what Q5 is doing, skipping the zeros. Then it reads the hashtag. Then it skips the X's that we crossed on the right. Then we remove two zeros. Exactly. We should go to Q5, 100%. Give a high-level description of M. Well, we already did it here. Right? Like, what are we doing? We're first checking. Of course, maybe I need to add some more stuff, like first mark the start of the tape, then check the format, then rewind, then start doing this algorithm. Last part. So the previous part was high, so check before. Already done, but we could add some more details, but can be more detailed. So the last part, how can we make our machine a recognizer instead of what it is currently? Currently, our machine, okay, so this part, suggests minor changes to M to make it a recognizer and not a decider. So this is actually what I think Mariam was asking in our Q&A before the exam. She mentioned things about recognizers and deciders. Now, these are have to do more with Turing machines, and it's a very important idea. A recognizer is, or a decider is, a machine that will be able to tell you when it should accept and when it should reject. So with a decider, if you give it something that should belong to the language, it will accept. If you give it something that doesn't belong to the language, it will reject. Now, this might seem weird. Isn't everything that we've done so far either accepts or rejects? True, everything we've solved so far with PDAs, NFAs, etc. At some point, we're either going to accept or we're going to reject. But with Turing machines, it's not the case. With Turing machines, it's possible that our machine, for example, might loop forever. Like that's happened before, right? Like you run a program and it just maybe you wrote a wrong code and it's looping forever. That's possible. So this is what a decider. It will know when to accept, when to reject. Well, what is a recognizer? If W belongs to L, it will accept it. So like it recognizes the strings that are correct, but if you give it a string that's not correct, it doesn't know. It might reject correctly, it might not. It might loop forever. So a recognizer will be like an imperfect decider. Like if you give it something that's correct, it's going to accept it. But if you give it something it should reject, it doesn't really know what to do. So how could I fix this? Remember, I don't want to ruin my machine. I don't want to make my machine accept something wrong or accept something or not accept something that it should accept. I just want to make it not always work. So to do that, tell me if you agree here. I could do something like this. If I read another hashtag here, So remember, at this part, what are we doing? 0 star. I read a hashtag, and then I'm currently reading 0 star again. I'll make it, if I'm at Q3 and I read a hashtag, I'll go to some place where I'm always moving to the right. Like, oh, if I now read another hashtag, or if I read a 0, or if I read a blank, keep going to the right. Essentially, I made it loop forever. If it reads like 2 hashtags. Is it now a recognizer? Yes. Why? If I give it something that it should accept, it's gonna accept it. Like it's gonna work completely as before when I only have one hashtag. If it's in the correct format, it's gonna accept it. However, if for some reason I give it 2 hashtags, like 0 star, hashtag 0 star, it's gonna go here and loop forever. So it doesn't always halt. It doesn't always stop. As you've maybe learned from today, we decide when the machine stops. It's because it can always keep reading the tape. It doesn't stop reading it when it reaches the end. We have to decide, oh, you reached the end, you should reject or accept, for example. Or you go back to rewind, but go back to the beginning. So this one makes it a recognizer because, well, it doesn't always work now. Does it make sense? However, it's important with recognizer, if you give it something that it should accept, it should still accept it. Like if I did something like this where, say I'm here, like I cross the first 0 and I cross the second 0 with an X and I make it a loop forever, this is now wrong. Because I might give it something that it should accept, but now it's gonna not accept it. It's gonna loop forever. So this is not correct. You should like pick a string that's not gonna work, like 3 hashtags, 5 hashtags. You can choose something specific if you want, and make sure it loops forever. Whereas this one is. So let me just write that as a note. So we want, so pick some string that should be rejected and make it loop forever. Then our machine becomes a decider. Don't pick a string that should be accepted. Oh, it becomes a recognizer. Don't pick a string that should be accepted and make it loop forever, because then it's no longer anything. It's no longer a decider, and it's no longer a decider, a recognizer, nor a decider. For a recognizer, it should still accept the correct strings that should be accepted. I say strings, but like tapes or whatever. However, if it should reject something, maybe maybe it does. Maybe it loops forever, etc. This is what makes it a recognizer and not a decider. Maybe one last thing. A decider knows when to accept and when to reject. Okay, that's it. So if this part was not clear, let me know. But essentially what we've done so far is all of this. Like if you look at this question like as it is right now with this big machine and like all this big question, it might seem frightening or whatever, but not really, right? Like if we break it down into part by part and understand what the original question was, we can do them, right? Like you don't. like with Turing machines, etc., we might be seeing a lot of these big questions. That's nothing to be afraid of. Just break it down into smaller parts and we can still manage it. Okay. So if you have any questions, let me know. Just remember like the three things. We want to be able to draw, we want to be able to give a high-level description, and we want to be able to read and understand machines. Okay. No problem, dear. Thank you. Thank you actually for coming. So I didn't do this alone. And I'll see you in the next one. So maybe on Tuesday we'll answer the question really, what is a computer? Because Turing machines, they're pretty close. They might be it. So see you on Tuesday.